Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 77. I have Andrew Bernstein, who is a longtime objectivist scholar affiliated with various organizations. He's authors of several books. We're going to talk mostly about heroes today and hero culture. So how are you, Andrew?
I'm good, Chris. Thanks for having me on. And if I can, I may hold up my book on this topic, Heroes, Legends, Champions, Why Heroism Matters, available from Amazon.
Yes.
So thank you for having me on to discuss this topic and my book, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, available electronically as well, I hope.
I know it's available as in an audio form.
Yeah.
I think it's available in Kindle, but definitely in hard copy and audio.
I always start out this way. How did you get into Ayn Rand?
Well, I was lucky. I had a high school teacher who was an objectivist. I'll mention his name. Was Jay Hyman. His name was, because he was a great guy. This was in the late 1960s, during the war in Vietnam and riots on college campuses. And Jay Hyman was a PE teacher, and he was teaching his hygiene. He went through the hygiene curriculum, rather easily, and spent a lot of the class discussing topical issues and the application of Ayn Rand's theories to topical issues. And it just made so much sense to me that summer, it was 1968, I read all of Ayn Rand's novels, and I knew right away this was the most important thing in the world, and that everybody should be reading this and thinking about it and talking about it. I was astonished then, and I'm still astonished today, 55 years later, at how few people read Ayn Rand, appreciate her, and understand her.
Yeah, and so you chose an academic path after that.
Well, I always knew from the time I was a little kid I wanted to be a writer. So, So I was an English major in college, philosophy major in grad school, but I was always a humanities guy. Literature, philosophy, history, any of those fields fascinated me. And I always knew I was going to be a writer. So, literature and philosophy, history, those are the fields that I've studied.
Yeah. So now we want to talk about heroes. Tell me, what do you notice about all of the heroes that you've studied and researched in your books?
Well, I think Ayn Rand really gave us, the moral understanding to really appreciate heroes, and that is, that human life is the standard of moral value. So that supporting human life is what makes somebody morally upright, and this is what heroes do. They're indefatigable and often extremely courageous in the support of human life. And some of the examples, I did the book is written. I always have a hard time finding the camera when I hold this up. The book is written in a very inductive style. I start with a number of examples. And some of the examples are George Washington Carver, the great agricultural scientist who made so many advances in agricultural science, who overcame enormous racial obstacles to get his education, and then so he faced social prejudice just to get his education, and then when you make advances in science, in this case agricultural science, you're dealing with the intractability of nature. Understanding nature's laws and putting them into effect is not easy. And so in this case, you're dealing with both natural difficulties and social prejudices, and he overcame to a significant degree. And his work in agricultural science, promoting crop rotation, bringing peanuts and sweet potatoes forth as leading crops, helping to salvage the soil for cotton. He definitely promoted human life in a very important way. Another example I used was Maria Montessori, and I'm not woke, by the way. This just happened to be a black guy and a woman. There's a lot of white males, who were great heroes. George Washington is one of my all time favorites, and Aristotle is another. Many, Michelangelo, Leonardo, so on. But Maria Montessori, the people who have been prejudiced against make good examples because she wanted to be, I think, originally an engineer. Girl growing up in Italy in the late 19th century, and everybody, girls don't become engineers, And similarly, when she changed her mind to study medicine, there are no female doctors, but she just pushed through all these lame, stupid social prejudices, and eventually, became an MD, the first, or at least one of the first female MDs in Italy. Overcame all those social obstacles and put her expertise to good use when she was working with kids, and realized what they needed in the field of education. She became, I think, the premier educator of the 20th century. Again, you're dealing with learning how to educate children in and of itself is difficult because you're dealing with with difficult intellectual issues, which she overcame. I think she solved to a significant degree with educating young children. But at the same time, you got to deal with social prejudices, against women, and she overcame all of that. So very, very great achievements in promotion of human life and overcoming severe difficulties and/or opposition that confronted her makes her a heroine, and a great one.
Yes, and she achieved all this in spite of the fact that she never took a formal class in education.
which I think was very helpful.
Yes,
Given what the schools of education are like, they're terrible.
yeah,
To put it in a word.
exactly.
So yes,
And I think people like George Washington Carver are forgotten heroes of the civil rights movement. I mean, this is a guy who did a lot for civil rights without ever really talking about civil rights.
yeah, he became well known as a scientist. This is in Alabama. Tuskegee is
Yeah,
Alabama, early 20th century. This is the brutal reign of Jim Crow, because he died I think it was in the 1940s when Jim Crow was still in effect. But he became famous, justly so, as as the great agricultural scientist he was, and a number. We don't want to fall into the prejudice of thinking that white Southerners were generally, bigots. There were enough who were, but not everybody, and violent bigots at that. And some of the schools, the white schools that actually, excluded blacks from attending back then, invited him to speak, on racial amity. And he was a great. Yeah, you're right. He was a great spokesman for racial harmony. So yes, he was a precursor of the civil rights movement. And by the way, Chris, the great Chinese philosopher Confucius said that the beginning of wisdom is to see to it that things are called by their right names. And I think the so-called civil rights movement is really the individual rights movement for Black Americans or non-white Americans. That I think that's the most accurate name, the individual rights movement for non-white Americans. I think.
yeah. Another one that comes to my mind, is Elijah McCoy with the lubricator cap, and that's where the phrase "Is it a real McCoy?" comes from.
That's right. The younger members of your audience may not have heard that expression, but when we were kids, that expression still had currency. It's the real McCoy, and yeah, you're right. It comes from Elijah McCoy, a Black American inventor in Michigan, I think, who most of his inventions were related to the railroad. And he's one of the great Black entrepreneurs. And I think he had his own company and made a good deal of money, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he's definitely Elijah McCoy, definitely a hero.
Does it seem like a lot of the heroes you profiled overcame some type of really great adversity, or did they come from fairly average beginnings?
Well, those two weren't mutually exclusive. You could come from very prosperous beginnings, but still, depending on what you choose to do in your life, still have to overcome great obstacles. One of the examples I use in the book is the great polar explorer Ernest Shackleton. And Shackleton, I think, if I remember correctly, came out of fairly affluent beginnings and was well educated. But the career he chose, put him in harm's way, to put it mildly. And his survival story, the endurance survival story, what year was that? It was around World War I, 1914, 1915, in that era. That survival story, when they were stranded in Antarctica and they had crossed the thousands of miles of ocean and some of the roughest seas in the world in an open boat, and then first had to climb mountains, and they weren't mountaineers. They didn't have any equipment, and Shackleton was able to rescue all of his guys. Along I think with Apollo 13, these are the two greatest survival stories I've ever heard in my life. And even though Jim Lovell and his crew were 200,000 miles from Earth, I still think Shackleton's story is even more incredible because they were alone. Jim Lovell and his crew were in contact with some of the greatest scientific minds, in the world, in Houston, to help them. Shackleton, these guys, they were on their own. It's an amazing survival story.
For people that don't know, Shackleton took a ship called the Endurance into the Antarctica, and they were going to try to cross the seas, but then they got caught up in icebergs and they lost the ship. They had to evacuate the ship, take the light boats off, cross over Antarctica, and then take and I think they took basically a rowboat to South Georgia or someplace like that, where
That's right.
Get to a radio station. And this was also during World War I, so the British Navy was occupied. Nobody was going to come looking for them. They knew they had to, and then I think when they got to South Georgia or wherever, they had to radio somebody, and they got help from people in Argentina.
Because they had to climb the mountains.
Yeah.
On South Georgia, which were, was steep and snow covered. And these guys weren't mountaineers. They didn't have the equipment of mountaineers, and they did it with like an axe and some rope. It's really mind-boggling. It's very inspiring. It shows what human beings can overcome in order to, it's a amazing man versus nature conflict. Yeah. And Chris, there was British scientist, and I think he was a polar explorer also, Raymond Priestley. And I wonder, he might have been a descendant of Joseph Priestley. I'm not sure. Yeah. But Priestley said something like about this. He said, for scientific, he's talking about the Antarctic explorers. He said, for scientific expertise, give me Robert, Falcon Scott. For mobility of travel, give me Roald Amundsen. But if you're in a hopeless situation and it seems there's no way out, get on your knees and pray for Ernest Shackleton. He said, what a tribute, to Shackleton's leadership quality.
Yeah. Everybody in Shackleton's career got out alive. I mean, who was that other guy? You mentioned somebody else named Loveland. Is that right? Or you mentioned
Loveland?
Somebody in space. Yeah.
Oh, Jim Lovell,
Jim Lovell. Okay.
Commander of Apollo 13.
Okay. What happened there?
Where the spaceship suffered an explosion as it approached the moon. It's another amazing survival story.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, well, Jim Lovell, and it was a famous movie Ron Howard made, 1995, I think, with Tom Hanks as James Lovell. Just the name of it was Apollo 13. But as a kid, I came out of a real neurotic family. My mother was so anxiety-ridden, and I was fascinated by the U.S. space program. These guys were always so calm. No matter what happened, they were so calm. That's what I always remembered. And when the spaceship suffered an explosion as it approached the moon, you can hear Jim Lovell's voice from space. Houston, we've had a problem. He's so calm. These guys were, slow heartbeat guys, as they say in sports. And it's such a great quality in the face of adversity and or danger to be able to remain calm and reason the problem out. That's
true. I mean, I think that's that's really the ultimate tribute of a great leader is a great leader is the calm in the storm.
Yeah.
When you, I mean, not real life, but that's always something I remember almost all the time with Captain Kirk on Star Trek. I mean, no matter what's going on, there's this sense of he doesn't remain calm. Of course, if he does start to lose calm, he has Spock right there by him.
I always loved the original
Yeah.
Star Trek TV series, and then later on the movies. And
Yeah.
William Shatner, I thought, played Captain Kirk so well. I remember the one episode that stands out in my mind is, remember Risk is Our Business? Remember that episode when they were
Risk is our business. I remember that phrase, but I don't remember which episode.
Yeah, they're coming in contact with some alien life forms, and who are obviously very advanced. And Dr. McCoy points out the dangers. These guys are so advanced. If they're hostile, they can destroy us, and it's great risk here. And Kirk agrees. He says, "Yeah, there is. I'm in command. I could make this decision unilaterally, but he's got my officers. But Dr. McCoy is right. Everybody's life here is at risk." But he says, I don't remember his exact words, but he talks about the great heroes of the past who first learned to risk their lives to learn how to fly, and then go to the moon, and then from there venture out of the solar system into the deeper part of the galaxies. And he says to Dr. McCoy, in your own field, the field of medicine, people risk their lives against taboos on medical procedures in order to show us how to do surgery and how to use anesthesia and all this stuff. He says, risk is our business. We're exploring the galaxy. We're at risk every day. Risk is our business. It's just a beautiful ode to the great risk takers throughout history who face danger, and brought about advance in human life in so many different ways. And certainly explorers are at risk every day, whether it's Magellan circumnavigating the globe, or the Apollo 11 astronauts going to the moon, or Elon Musk wants to, SpaceX wants to send people to Mars. I mean, space travel is dangerous, and risk. Yeah, there's great risk in it, but the reward from being able to explore the solar system and the galaxy, the tremendous possible rewards.
Sometimes I think what Magellan did is more remarkable, just because. Sometimes I think what Magellan did was more remarkable because they just did not have the instrumentation that they had in the 60s. I mean, how did they really know that and somehow they measured a lot of these things and they got them pretty close to being correct. I mean, how would you possibly measure the distance from the Earth to the sun in the 1700s or the 1600s? It just seems unfathomable to me that you could ever make those measurements.
Yeah, I know there were great mathematicians who came pretty close in measuring the circumference of the Earth and stuff, but in history, but by sheer, just genius thinking based on limited observation, the shadows that are cast on and things like issues like that enabled them to make brilliant calculations. But regarding Magellan, Magellan, nobody had any idea the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. It was difficult enough to round Cape Horn, and of course he found the Straits of Magellan, which nobody found again for another 50 years. Nobody was able to get through until Francis Drake, roughly 55 years later, 50 years later. But once they got through the Straits of Magellan out into the Pacific, they thought they thought that Japan, and the Far East was much closer than in reality it was. And they suffered, crossing the South Seas, for I don't remember how long it took them, but it was a long time. And without fresh water, and they scurvy and everything. But Magellan evidently was a great seaman, and he was also a great leader. He had great leadership qualities. So yeah, what Magellan did was extraordinary, without a doubt.
Yeah, that's unfortunate they didn't leave to see it finished, but they obviously had documentation. And I've often wondered too, did they really calculate that the Japan was that far away, or was it partially wishful thinking? I mean, you always hope
But
it's
no,
going to be
yeah.
shorter than it is. you know,
Nobody knew, but they were
yeah,
going with the best available
mhm,
knowledge of the cartographers of their day. I don't
yeah.
remember the numbers, but I think they thought it was I think they thought it was less than 1,000 nautical miles from present day Mexico to Japan, when in reality it's something like 5,500 nautical miles or something.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like that. It was vastly greater than the map makers of that day had estimated. So it was a tremendous achievement to get across the Pacific. And since Magellan had been in the Spice Islands earlier, from you're coming from around Cape of Good Hope, coming around the tip of Africa into Asia, he was the first, therefore the first person that we know of anyway, to circumnavigate the globe. He and his slave, who one of his slaves had been with him on both voyages from the west and from the east.
What do you think motivates the explorers? Do you think there was a desire for profit, or do you think they just wanted to be able to say that they did something that nobody else had done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. With the Spanish conquistadores, they say the three G's: gold, God, and glory, right? I don't know how much God, uh, played a role in there, but Magellan was a devout Catholic, and that's partly what got him killed in the Philippines. And so bringing God to the so-called heathens, was a real issue for him, bringing Jesus to the non-believers. But I think there's something deeper than than religion. With the great explorers, I think there's just this kind of quenchless curiosity, like what's out there. What are we going to find when we this quest for certain type of knowledge. And to map the earth, to explore the earth, to know the earth. I think there's a deep fascination with that kind of geographic knowledge that drives many of the explorers. And I think again, space, the final frontier. I think it's similar. Although Elon Musk, I think, is very mixed. To me, he's largely a hero. One, because of SpaceX, and two, because of what he's done with Twitter. And I think, there's this real burning curiosity that some people have. What is it like on Mars? What the scientific knowledge we could gain there. Can we colonize Mars? Can human beings live on Mars? There's a desire for knowledge. There's a desire to expand the horizons of human life. And I think there's a lot of noble motives that go into being a great explorer.
Yeah, and sometimes these stories don't end up very well. I mean, apparently, Henry Hudson's crew revolted and they just marooned him somewhere, and he was never heard from
Yeah,
again.
well, in Hudson Bay, with his kid, his son, who was like 12 or 13, and they were never heard from again. Being an explorer is dangerous, and by its very nature, you're going off somewhere that nobody's ever been before, and you're going to be lost. And can you get back? Can you? Will your crew be loyal to you? There's, Magellan's crew mutinied also. So it's not uncommon. There's all different kind of dangers. Then you have to face hostile tribes, like hostile peoples, like Magellan did in the Philippines, like where he got killed. There's all kinds of dangers. You got to be courageous, super courageous to go off into the unknown. Really motivated to find out what's out there.
Well, and sometimes, it can just be somebody like, Hillary and Norgay climbing Mount Everest for the first time, or Roger Bannister running a mile in 4 minutes. It's like nobody's done this before. Yeah. Just
yeah. Well, Was it? It was Mallory, wasn't it? The great mountaineer who died on Everest. When they asked him why, he said because it's there. I think it was Mallory
I don't know
who
who it
said
was, but
that.
they just said because it was there. It's a
Yeah, I think it was Mallory. He was a great mountaineer, New Zealand, I think, who
yeah.
died on Everest, 1920s maybe. Yeah, it's a tremendous challenge for
Yeah.
somebody who's got this courageous this courageous spirit. You take that as a great challenge. Go further, go faster. What's the motto of the modern Olympic Games? Citius, Altius, Fortius, right? Swifter, higher, stronger. It is, there's the leitmotif, I think, of many of great men and women. They want to go more, go further, do more. It's a great challenge. Push the envelope.
Yeah.
Chuck Yeager,
I think.
remember the test pilot
Oh yeah.
who
Chuck
first broke the
Yeager.
sound
Yeah, I
barrier
definitely know.
and first broke the sound barrier and did it with broken ribs. you know, it's just you're risking your life, but it's not. Partly it's about glory. I'll be known as the first man to break the sound barrier, but glory is external. I think there's an internal locus here that pushes these kind of heroes. I know it in here that I did this.
Yes, the first man to
push push back the barriers of nature. Expand the human ability to achieve at a high level.
I can imagine.
Very powerful force and a very positive one.
Yeah, it's got to be very disorienting to go that fast. I mean, Chuck Yeager being the first man to go faster than the speed of sound. I don't know what kind of impact it'll have on us if we ever get to, go faster than the speed of light. It's, you don't think about it when you're riding in a car, but your whole body is moving at, 50 miles an hour or something like that. You don't really notice it, but it also gets you when you stop, thinking about dangerous places, I know we've both seen that movie Sound of Freedom, and I was naturally thinking of I don't want to give away too much, but the part where he goes into the rainforest, it really is like that. Because I've been there in Peru. Yeah. But not Colombia, baby.
Yeah. It was I strongly recommend everybody to see Sound of Freedom. For several reasons. One, it's just a great story. It's harrowing, though. It's not a fun story. It's about child, sex slavery. So it's brutal. But artistically, I mean, it's a great story. You get drawn into this, and you want to see how it ends. It's aesthetically, I think it's a great movie. Morally, it raises this important point that understandably most of us don't want to discuss. That there's this widespread trafficking in children, and in pedophilia. These kids are enslaved, in the sex trafficking, and they're kids. And it's just, morally, it's very courageous to raise this issue when almost nobody wants to talk about it. And a lot of people, deny it. They claim that it's Trump propaganda, it's QAnon, stuff. But independent of Trump or QAnon, it's real. The child sex trafficking is real, and it's horrible. And anybody who cares about human life and especially children, should see this movie and get other people to see it and speak up and speak out, and see if we can motivate law enforcement to do what they can to crack down. It's hard. There must be a lot more pedophiles in the world that I was aware of. There's got to be money in this, otherwise the sex trafficking wouldn't exist, in this way. And I understand some of the people engaged in the sex trafficking, not surprising, are the drug cartels. They get money any way they can, and so this is going to be a hard nut to crack, but it's horrifying. Kids get kidnapped and sold into sex slavery. Taken. Remember the first Taken, the Liam Neeson film back in 2009, maybe 2010. One of the best action movies. Yeah, one of the best action movies I've seen in many years. His 17-year-old daughter was kidnapped, and they sell her, and they would turn her into a drug-addicted sex slave. Uh, you know, uh, yeah, well, that's what the sex traffickers do, and it's just horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. So, Sound of Freedom, I think, is a very important film, and I strongly recommend it. These guys are heroes. They're risking their lives to rescue children from the brutal, sex slave traffickers.
Yeah.
Little kids.
If there's any political agenda in that movie, I think he would like to see more cooperation among governments to fight this. The American law enforcement with, Mexicans, with Colombians, with whoever. That's the one thing I thought,
Right. And, I'm a big, legalized drug guy, because I think in a free country,
and legalized prostitution for consenting adults as well. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I remember saying to a friend of mine, we were talking about consenting adults. So, I said, Nancy and I can have sex for free, but we can't have sex for money. I mean, how does that even make sense? Consenting adults, and have in a free country have the right to engage in money for sex. Not my cup of tea. I like a little relationship with my sex. I'm funny that way. But in a free country, individual rights need to be protected. Adults have the right to choose what substances they can ingest in their bodies and everything. If we legalize drugs and prostitution, all that money and manpower and really good tough cops and smart tough cops a lot of times in the DEA, and retrained and directed towards real criminals, the sex trafficking, I think we could at least make a dent in this and protect some of the kids who were kidnapped and sold into sex slavery.
I hope so too.
These are real criminals,
And unfortunately, also, too, sometimes this just happens because of things like poverty. Kids run away from home at the age of 12 or something like that, and that's what the girls may end up doing because they can't do anything else. And they're not legally allowed to do anything else. So,
sometimes the underage sex done voluntarily, but for a 12-year-old kid, it's still statutory rape.
And if you want to see,
the worst of all the kids who are kidnapped and forced into sex slavery.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting too. What motivates him. He gets this point. He says, "Okay, I'm arresting pedophiles. I don't want to arrest pedophiles anymore. I want to go try to save some kids."
Yeah. That's the real heroic here. Ayn Rand always, one of the principles of the objectivist ethics that I really love is reward the good. It's more important to reward the good than it is to punish the evil. It is important to punish the evil, but rewarding the good, or in this case, saving the good, is more important. Important to punish the pedophiles. That's horrible criminal action that they're perpetrating. Yeah. Most important is to save the good, is to save those kids who are completely innocent.
What did you think of that other character, the character who helps him out? Because this guy he was one of the bad guys, and then he has a moment, and he realizes, I have to stop doing this. I can't. Do you think a lot of our heroes are motivated by that in some way? They're trying to atone, or maybe sometimes even cover up, but they truly are repenting, want to do the right, and want to work, and so they end up working harder to do the right thing.
Yeah, I remember the character in the movie you're talking about had been, what was he? He was working for the Colombian drug cartel in one capacity or another, who are really bad guys. I mean, they're stone cold killers. So he's helping, even at the very least, he's getting his money by helping people kill themselves on drugs and supporting these murderers who will kill anybody who gets in their way. And then he has an epiphany when he has sex with a prostitute, and he realizes she's a child. She may look older, but she's 12, 13, 14, something like that. And he realizes how much the sex trafficking goes on. He turns his life around and becomes a real hero. It's powerful. I don't know. A lot of the heroes that I've studied, real life heroes or fictional, don't come out of a background that heinous where where they've been working for the drug cartels and have blood on their hands. But I think it's because human beings have free will, it's certainly possible. And you see cases in real life, and this may be the story about this character in the Sound of Freedom may be true to real life. But you see people in real life who commit some violent crime and they're in prison, and they realize the horror, of what they've done. And there was a great movie when I was a kid, a long time ago, Birdman of Alcatraz, with Burt Lancaster. And based on a true story, I think his name was Robert Stroud, who was a murderer, and in prison, was sentenced to life in prison, maybe. In prison, he did all this research on birds, and he developed, he pushed the knowledge further on birds and the diseases of birds. I think he published on it, and he became, so he did. He expanded human knowledge in this, in this field as a self-made scientist. And there are people like that who realize they did some horrible deed, and then spend the rest of their life trying to make up for it by doing good deeds. And it's heroic. I don't think most of our heroes come out of that kind of past, but there are certainly some who do.
Well, one thing, if you used to be a bad guy, you also have some idea of how the bad guys think. So you might be more effective at fighting the bad guys. I mean, take somebody take somebody like Kevin Mitnick, who recently died. I mean, he was a notorious hacker who became a security consultant. And
is that right?
And of course, he knew how hackers think, though, which is why he could help businesses protect themselves against hackers.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that story, but there's a good example of the point. Somebody because hackers could do a lot of damage and do. Yeah. And here's somebody who obviously got God, who got morality, and turned his life around. And there are stories, true stories like that. People who were convicted drug dealers and who repented of. They got all their money by helping people kill themselves on drugs, or maybe they even were killers, in the drug wars. And when they were paroled, they came out and worked with kids and went into the schools about talking to the kids about the dangers of drug use and dangers of joining the gang and stuff like that. So these are heroes who morally turned their lives around, and it's very inspiring, and it shows human free will in action.
Yes, it does. I mean, that's the question I wondered. I mean, do you think these heroes just are, or do they become?
I mean, that's certainly a good question. I think it varies from individual to individual. You remember, for example, Edison's famous line that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Well, if we're talking about intellectual giants heroes, the Ayn Rands or the Thomas Edisons or the Aristotles or the Newtons or Beethovens or Shakespeare's, people like that, then that 1%, I think Edison's right, that 1% inspiration has to be there. They have to have a certain, if you're talking about great athlete heroes, Michael Jordan, of course, the GOAT. He has to be born with a certain kind of body. Einstein has to be born with a certain kind of brain, and then you put a tremendous amount of study or hard work and effort with the great football player Jerry Rice used to call the sweat equity. You put the sweat equity into this to gain mastery in whatever the field is. So I think in those kind of cases, I think it's both. They're born with a certain kind of ability. But a lot of people are born with ability. The saddest story of human life is squandered ability. People who I've seen it as a teacher, and any teacher has seen it. People who have tremendous talent in music or intellect or sports or whatever it is, but they, for one reason or another, they become drug addicts or alcoholics, or they're just depressed by the state of the world, and they just don't have the impetus to push forward and actualize their potential in Aristotle's terms. So I think the great heroes and geniuses of human life are generally born with a certain talent level, but then they choose to put in the sweat equity. Great expression from Jerry Rice. Put in the sweat equity, to put in the effort to actualize that that innate talent. And so there's a lot of hard work that goes into being. Doesn't matter how brilliant Shakespeare was when he was born. A lot of hard work that goes into writing, Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth, and King Lear and so on and so forth.
And Jerry Rice is a great example because he was not that highly regarded when he came out of high school. I mean, and then he goes.
Yeah, where did he go to college? Mississippi Valley
State. I mean, it's one of those, a Division I AA school, and he got, well, at the time, San Francisco was the defending Super Bowl champions, so they had the last draft pick in the first round. There were all these people could have, gotten Jerry Rice. Everybody else in the NFL could have gotten Jerry Rice, but
and for Chris, for people who aren't football fans, Jerry Rice is the greatest wide receiver in the history of the game. He played 20 years in the NFL. He was a wide receiver in his early 40s. Because his workouts, he's born with a certain kind of body, obviously, and then his workouts were legendary. Where he worked out like 8 hours a day or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and that's something too. Say compared to you're talking about Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan wasn't that tall. I mean, compare him to say Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, some of these heroes, it's all, for whatever reason, it looks like it's always easy for them. Yeah. And Wilt Chamberlain is probably an example of that. But and it is unfortunate the wasted talent. But I also think sometimes you just end up with the wrong teachers or the wrong coaches, and in some cases you burn out.
Yeah. I see that with a lot of top teachers who suffer from burnout. There's the people who achieve, at this high level, they just keep pushing themselves. Speaking of MJ, I remember Bill Walton, who was when he was healthy, was a great player himself. As a commentator on TV, saying that Michael Jordan was the hardest working superstar in the NBA. That he put so much work into practice, and everything. And this is how you get to, you're born with a certain kind of body, and then you work out like a fiend, and that's how you get to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time. I think in these cases, there's a certain sense in which these great achievers or great heroes are born, but overwhelmingly they make themselves into what they are. I think Edison nailed it. 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
And I do sometimes wonder if maybe his brief retirement actually inspired him to come back and do even better. Because after his father was murdered, he quit for 2 years and played baseball. And the baseball, and the baseball coaches were amazed with him. They said, they just said, he listens.
He's he's an exceptional, an absolutely exceptional talent in his field. And another really good movie, recently was that movie about Nike's the executives at Nike deciding to go all in on hiring him as their pitch guy. Was that the name of the movie? I'm trying to.
Air something. Yeah, there was Air. Yeah, there was something Air Jordan. Yeah, there was that movie Air movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just earlier this year. Again, it's very good.
Air. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Air, and it shows how Nike was not a big basketball shoe company, and they're running shoe, and then they decided MJ, he's the guy to put us on the map. That there's just something special about him. There was just some quality of greatness, and they put all their money, their basketball money from that division into luring him away from Adidas and everything. And what that was a brilliant move on their part. It's hard, because he was still a skinny college kid, great player, but there was no way to envision what he would. I guess there was. They did. It was hard to envision what he was going to become, and some of those guys in Nike saw it. Because Hakeem Olajuwon came out, that he was another great player, and he was drafted number 1 in the draft. Can't fault Houston for that.
Yes.
But MJ went 3rd in the draft, and
yes,
these guys at Nike saw, no, MJ's the man. He's the guy. They went after him. They were right.
And Hakeem ended up being a pretty good player too, but we won't talk about Sam Bowie.
yeah.
Who was the second pick and a complete bust.
From Kentucky, might have been a decent player if he stayed healthy, but he couldn't stay healthy, and taking him ahead of MJ was, even if he stayed healthy, was not a good pick.
That's such a roll of the dice, though. I would not be unhappy if I'd picked Hakeem Olajuwon, but I certainly would be unhappy if I'd picked Sam Bowie.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But it's hard to see. It's just hard to see potential. What somebody's going to become. That's very difficult to predict. And sports is a good example for this, Chris, because you hear all the time, so and so is a can't miss prospect. But can't miss prospects oftentimes miss. It's just hard to see. It's hard to visualize what somebody's gonna be that 5-10 years down the road.
There's a lot of factors involved in this too, though. What I was saying about burnout. Apparently, Ichiro, the baseball player, does not speak to his father because his dad was the crazy baseball dad.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And that's
he was a great
ended
player,
up being a tremendous player, but it's like it's really sad you don't talk to your dad at all. So
well, his dad evidently pushed him so hard.
Yeah.
And there's another challenge, about parenting. You want to encourage your kid to be the best they could be, but to push them that hard where the kid's gonna end up hating you. Was that joke, and it's not really funny, but that joke about the tiger mom who stereotypically is Asian but doesn't necessarily have to be Asian, where she said, well, it's true my daughter committed suicide at age 27, but by God, she played Carnegie Hall at age 26. What?
Oh, yeah. That's
not funny.
It does happen. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to push the kid that hard. You encourage them always. But it's hard. Being a good parent,
I've known some former child actors, and life is not always easy for them. I've met them as adults.
Being a good parent has heroic qualities. Knowing how to encourage your child. You want the child to excel, and knowing when to back off. And leave the kid be and let the kid go out and play. Have fun. That's being a good parent has. There's I think it was Charles Barkley, another great basketball player, who got in trouble for saying it about kids shouldn't have athletes as their role models. Yeah. He said, I know drug dealers and schoolyards who could dunk a basketball. He said parents should be role models. Parents should be the kids' heroes. Yeah. And that, I have no problem with great athletes or these other great heroes being role models or heroes for kids growing up. But first, foremost, and always, parents should man up, take that responsibility, be the hero of your own life, to the best you can, and be the hero of your child's life.
Yeah, and it does, certainly does happen that way, though. Mary Lou Retton sees Nadia Comaneci on TV. Shannon Miller sees Mary Lou Retton on TV. See how it goes here.
Yeah. A lot of your viewers may not be sports fans, because you might want to explain who those ladies are.
Yeah, but these were all gymnasts. It's a, it just continues a cycle of wanting to go.
Yeah, great gymnasts, Olympic gold medal winning gymnasts, right? Yeah,
and certainly and who hasn't occasionally watched? We'd occasionally watch what these Olympic swimmers are doing, and there they are. And I will never forget what a swim coach told me as a teenager. He said the best swimmers in the world look like they're loafing, and I said, "You're right, they do. They don't look like they're working hard at all."
Yeah, some people are so talented, and they put in so much effort to excel at what they do, that they make it look easy, and it's not easy.
And swimming is one of those sports where certain people do have advantages. I mean, the best swimmer I ever knew personally wore a size 15 shoe. I mean, you want to talk about an advantage. So you do sometimes have advantages, but
definitely.
And that's another.
Kids. Burned out. Yeah, certainly Michael Phelps would have to be on anybody's short list of the great swimmers, right? And as I recall, he also had big hands, big feet, long reach, right? And pull yourself.
Long arms, long legs.
Yeah, and big hands and feet. That certainly has got to be an advantage to a competitive swimmer. But at the same time, somebody like that, when they're in the pool, God knows how many hours a day for years, working out to become, what did he win? 8 gold medals in the Olympics?
8 gold medals. He won 8 gold medals in one Olympics, which had never been done before. So
2008 in Beijing, right? And he ended up his career. So he had something like 24. He had something like 24 gold medals. Yeah. He had more gold medals in entire countries than athletes of entire countries have won. Well, you put in a lot of practice time to be that good.
It's unfortunate because some of the sports you're only allowed to go in 4 track and field events, so you can't win more medals than 4 in track and field. But swimming lets you swim in as many as you want, so that's where he got to get those medals. Yeah, and maybe the most interesting thing too, Michael Phelps still has one world record that's standing. I mean, for a world record in swimming to stand for 15 years that's a very long time.
And swimming for sure. Yeah. And athletes, I think, can be real heroes for us, because we see the hard work they put in. We know about the hard work they put into getting to this level. We see them pursuing excellence. They want to win the Super Bowl or win the World Series or win the Olympic gold or whatever it is. See them very often coming through under pressure. The thing I love about sports is it gives you the capacity to be heroic, and nobody has to get hurt. Nobody has to get killed. It's not like in warfare, and the guys, some people, to use basketball example, some people are like Larry Bird or Michael Jordan. They want to take the last shot, whereas other people like shy away from it, and you see these guys who have the slow heartbeat guys, as they say in sports. They have grace under pressure. And, it's inspiring. You see, these guys work so hard to get to that level, and they're so good under pressure. They're clutch. It's inspiring. What might I do in my life in my own field, whatever that is, if I put as much work into this as Larry Bird put into becoming who he was, or Michael Jordan, or Magic Johnson, or LeBron, it's inspiring. It would inspire us to be they're striving to be the best they can be. We could do the same in our lives, in our own fields.
Yeah, I'm always reluctant to speak positive. Being a lifelong Laker fan, it gets hard to talk about this, but there was that game in the NBA Finals, Game 5 in 1984, where it was really hot in Boston. Boston Garden had no air conditioning,
right.
And Larry Bird just went out and played and said, "So what?" And he said, I played in the summer at home back all the time in this. Just completely blocks out that Boston Garden is basically an oven, and has one of the best games of his life.
Larry Bird. I mean, before Michael Jordan rose to
Yeah.
be the GOAT. Larry Bird was the best all-around player I'd ever seen, and Magic Johnson I thought was like right there, maybe a hair
And,
behind.
and what's so beautiful is when those two guys started out, they absolutely hated each other, and by the time they
Yeah,
retired, they were best friends.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. It's a great story.
yeah,
It is.
yeah. I mean, I love Johnson. I can't hate Larry Bird just for that reason, because even though I'm a lifelong Laker fan, it's
Yeah, I
he's
understand.
the one Celtic I'm allowed to like. Yeah.
Well, he worked so hard to
Oh yeah,
become
yeah,
who he was.
yeah. Oh yeah, he worked. Yeah, yeah. There's a guy. You'd never expect this guy's a pro athlete. Yeah, yeah, he is. Because he did it all on work. And I think just having
Yeah,
this, just having this complete can-do attitude of, it's
yeah,
yeah,
and it's interesting because the kid from French Lick, Indiana, was not from the hood. He's a white boy from rural Indiana. Was the greatest trash talker in the history of the NBA, or maybe or one of them anyway. One of my favorite Larry Bird stories was that they were playing Cleveland in the playoffs, and they were in Cleveland. Bird's taking the ball out of bounds, and one of the Cavalier fans, yells at him right behind him. He says, "The Cavaliers are going to beat you, Larry." Bird inbounds the ball. He turns around. He says to the fan, "You got a better chance of seeing God." He goes,
there is one. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder how true these stories are. But his first meeting with Dominique Wilkins, and who ended up coming in pretty decent. But Wilkins tries to shake his hand, and then Bird says, "I'm going to score 40," and then Wilkins says, "Well, I won. He only scored 39."
Yeah, there's great Larry Bird stories they tell about the one game he was so dominant. One game he said, "I'm just going to shoot with my left hand," and he scored like 27 points just shooting left-handed. I think it was against Portland. Yeah, these are true stories probably, but they're like tall tales. They're like American tall tales, And again, they're inspiring. This is the kind of mastery that's possible for human beings to attain. And I don't aspire to be a great trash talker, but to be able to back it up, because when you talk like that, Michael Jordan was a great trash talker also. When you talk like that, you're putting a big bullseye on your chest and on your back.
Oh yeah.
And then you got to back it up, and Bird and MJ could and did. So that part of it, I respect. But I don't want to be the trash talk. I just want to be the guy who actualizes his potential.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very inspiring to see. That's why I love sports. I think why a lot of people. It's the one place in the culture where heroism is still applauded. The anti-hero mentality dominates in literature and the arts.
It's also the only place where you see really great leadership.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
don't see it in politics, that's for sure.
You don't see it much in business. You see it, there are great high school football coaches who are great leaders, and you never even know their names, and they don't make a lot of money, but they go out and for a lot of these high school football coaches, they want to win, but they also care that my boys my boys learn to be successful in life, and they hope they can do that. It's
right.
I don't.
That's right. Coaches like teachers can and often do a lot of good.
And I think that's important because America and the West is just mired in this victim culture so badly right now. And I don't know what our antidote for that is.
Well, I think heroes are certainly part of it. And, literature and the arts are often mired in that anti-hero mentality, although they still make movies about heroes, like Air, about Nike and Michael Jordan, and Sound of Freedom, about these kids trying to protect children from the sex traffickers. But serious literature is often very dominated by the idea that we're victims, we're helpless in the face of various evils in our lives. We can't take charge of our lives and kind of make it turn out the way we can, the way Howard Roark does in my favorite book, The Fountainhead. It's just not realistic. But the one place in culture where I think it's unambiguously good to be heroic and that where people admire it is in sports. No, there's no talk here. We're not going to make Michael Jordan play. Obviously he's retired many years now. But we're not going to make Michael Jordan play wearing a 20-pound weight vest to slow him down. And
Yeah.
go on and do your thing. And may the best man win. And sports is the one place in the culture of undiluted heroism where we can gain insight into how you become so good at what you do and inspiration to be the best that we could be.
Yeah, I just don't. It's when you're building monuments to a guy whose only claim to fame is a bunch of crimes and being a victim of police brutality.
Oh, like George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd, exactly. Yeah,
he was a criminal. He wasn't a good guy. But there are lots of good guys in the world. Some of them are athletes. Yeah, and I think we need to become. I know. I got to get back to my own work in a little bit. Although this conversation is very is a lot of fun, but I know we need to become a society of hero worshipers again.
Mm-hmm.
Not literally worshiping heroes like God, but what that means is one, great admiration for the people who push themselves to achieve at the highest level, and then two, seeking to emulate that, seeking to do that in our own lives. That if we become a society of hero worshipers in that way, in the past, I think a lot of people were hero worshipers. It's kind of frowned on in our day as being unrealistic because the anti-hero mentality is much more dominant than the hero worship. But I think that in and of itself would greatly improve American society.
Yeah, I thought it was well done, but that was one thing that I could never get past with a show like Breaking Bad. You watched a good guy go bad, and I mean, and it was very well acted, very very well acted, and very well done. But it's just like I can't root for this guy. And if I'm watching something, I need to feel like I want to have somebody I can root for.
Yeah, I know. I understand. That's why you mentioned Star Trek before. That's why these guys. Kirk is a hero. I can definitely get behind him. Or the BBC does these series on Sherlock Holmes, and even though they depict them, and Benedict Cumberbatch is great, but they depict him as really neurotic. Still, he's always the smartest guy in the room, and his genius is always put in service of protecting the innocent against criminals, or solving the crime, punishing the guilty. He's always the hero. He's always the good guy, no matter how neurotic he may be. Or somebody like House, who's socially a misfit and everything. But if you're sick or somebody you love is sick with some disease that nobody knows, this is the guy you want, right? This is the guy who could save your life.
I think that's kind
These
of
guys are heroes.
And we know Ayn Rand was a big fan of Perry Mason, and that was another case too.
Perry Mason.
You had the lawyer who always tried to figure out what was going on, and you kind of got an older Raymond. You've kind of got an older Raymond Burr going there, by the way. It's interesting, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, Earl Stanley Gardner wrote those great novels about the brilliant lawyer Perry Mason, and then they made it into a great TV series. A little before my time in the 50s, I think it was, but I saw it in reruns as a kid, and I loved Perry Mason. He was a real hero.
I think it was also the first legal drama, period. I don't know if there's anything else before that.
Yeah, it could be. It's 1950, so the very early days of commercial TV. But he was a real hero. He always figured out who done it, that his client was innocent, always won the case, got the innocent person off. That poor DA who opposed him in all those TV series must have been his lifetime record must have been like 0 and 547. He should have went out and found a new career. But Perry Mason was a real hero, and those old TV shows are probably still available on YouTube. And I'm guessing you could get the Earl Stanley Gardner novels probably from Amazon. It's really heroic stuff. It's really, it is good. And all these, James Bond, the Secret Agent, and the hard-boiled detectives, like Mike Hammond, Philip Marlowe, and these guys. They're real, they're real heroes. They stand for justice.
Yeah, they do. And also going back, Marshall Dillon, Matt Dillon. and
Oh
Gunsmoke.
yeah, Gunsmoke.
Yeah,
Sure.
Part of what makes Kirk a hero though is he's such a great leader because he has a, he's the captain of the ship, and he's he's not as good as any of the three guys under him, but he takes all these three egos and gets them all to work together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The interesting. Star Trek was great sci-fi, and it was also philosophical because you had that reason emotion issue there, where Spock was pure reason and Dr. McCoy was almost pure emotion, and Kirk was like the integration of the two. He was the balance of of the two, and it was well done. It was well done.
And Kirk always had a sense of justice and fairness about him too that I think worked. Well, this has been a good show. I think it sounds like you got to go. So
yeah, I've got. Well, people can find me at my website at andrewbernstein.net, andrewbernstein.net, or on my Facebook page. I've got a novel coming out the end of next month, early September. I've long feared, Chris, that the country is being pushed into race war, and I spent years working on this book, Reckoning, which will be out. America, race war comes to America. It's grim, but it's I think it's very well plotted, and I'll on social media I'll link to it when we get the Amazon pre-order ready.
Yeah.
So Reckoning is the name of it.
And you're not related to the comedian Robbie the Fire Bernstein, right?
That's correct. No relation.
Yeah, he does that show with Dave Smith. So please like, subscribe, follow. I'm Chris Baker. You can check out my Substack and also go buy my own novel, Escape from the Village. And that's the end. We are out.